Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at a section of Understanding Judaism by Benjamin Blech. Most of the book is a decent introduction to Orthodox Judaism. I say decent because there are better books on the subject, such as To Be a Jew by Chaim Donim. It's a better book on the subject, so if you want a book on that, read it. But what we're going through is a section of Understanding Judaism that takes the occasional jab at Christian doctrines, but near the end is the most offensive part. The author goes seemingly into a rage, accusing Jesus of desecrating and abrogating the laws of Moses. One technique the anti-missionary and conspiracy theorists and some college professors use is called smuggling assumptions. In a normal presentation about a conversational topic, the presenter will first introduce the issue with statements that are generally undisputed by all sides of a debate. The presenter will then tell his or her side of the story and give arguments for it and respond to objections. The less honest presenter, however, will smuggle statements that are in fact disputed by other sides into his or her introduction statements, which are assumed to be uncontroversial. See how many smuggled assumptions you can find in the following passage. It was Jesus who, when walking with his disciples on the Sabbath through the wheat fields, allowed his companions to pick and eat ears of wheat. When rabbis censured him for desecration of the Sabbath law, Jesus replied, "The Son of Man is master of the Sabbath." Matthew 12, 1-8. This was not a case of mortal danger legitimizing the violation of the Sabbath. There was no emergency, and yet Jesus permitted the desecration of the Sabbath. The old law could be replaced with the new. The Old Testament would be dismissed as secondary and non-binding in light of the New Testament, which stressed faith over law. There is an unresolved discrepancy between Jesus' practice and his claim. "Do not suppose that I have come to do away with the law or the prophets. I have not come to do away with them, but to enforce them. For I tell you, as long as heaven and earth endure, not one dotting of an I or crossing of a T will be dropped from the law until all is observed. Anyone, therefore, who weakens even one of the slightest of these commandments and teaches others to do so will be ranked lowest in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who observes them and teaches others to do so will be ranked high in the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 5, 17-19. When Jesus and his disciples failed to observe a fast, the justification was, "No one sews a new patch of unshrunken cloth into an old coat, for if he does, the patch tears away the new from the old, and makes the whole worse than ever. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins, for if he does, the wine bursts the skins. New wine has to be poured into fresh skins." Mark 12, 21-22. The law was old and had to be done away with. If it had any justification, it was only for sinners. I agree the law is excellent, provided it is legitimately used, with the understanding that the law is not intended for upright men, but for the lawless and disorderly, the godless and the irreligious, the irreverent and profane, men who kill their fathers or mothers, murderers, immoral people, men sexually perverted, kidnappers, liars, perjurers, or whatever else is contrary to sound teaching, as set forth in the glorious good news of the blessed God which I have been entrusted. 1 Timothy 1, 8-11. The righteous of faith do not need law. The dietary laws of God could be discarded. All foods are clean. Mark 7:19. Clearly stated biblical laws could be discarded. They, the Jews, were told anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife on any ground except unfaithfulness makes her commit adultery, and anyone who marries her after she is divorced commits adultery. Matthew 5:31. The list is long. The facts are incontrovertible. The one who claims he came not to do away with the law or the prophets acted contrary to this assertion. By his deeds he taught that what God had said long ago could be revised, amended, and improved. Blech then quotes anachronistically from Maimonides, who, having Jesus in mind when he wrote this, said that the Mosaic law, as understood and interpreted by the rabbis, is eternal and absolutely unchangeable. If anyone challenges the rabbinic understanding of the Mosaic law, no matter how many miracles he uses to support his case, that person is a false prophet. In short, Blech's case is that Jesus violated the law of Moses, knew that he was violating the law of Moses, and then made excuses for his disobedience afterward. The main smuggled assumption in this section is that all sides agree that Jesus did violate the laws of Moses, and the debate is over whether his reasons for violating the law was justified. But did Jesus even violate the Mosaic law? Well, first let's take a look at some of the rabbinical views on the issue. Remember that Benjamin Blech's objection is not that Jesus' view is incoherent within the Christian system. His objection is that it is inherently wrong to abrogate the law of Moses, or to violate in any way outside of a life or death emergency. When I was listening to a presentation by a Kollel rabbi regarding the rulings of the tractate Eruvin of the Talmud, page 13b. In it, the sages discuss what to do with contradictory rulings, when one rabbi says something and one rabbi says the other. Their solution was Elu ve'elu, that both are the word of God. I'm going to play a 2 minutes or so clip from that session just to show you how the rabbis resolve it.
Now let me explain this Gemara. Again, I'm not getting into Kabbalah, I'm not into this, I'm just going to do my best to explain it the way I understand it. And as follows. There is a Ritva. I'm going to go with the Ritva. Rashi in Ksubas doesn't learn this way, but for here we're going to learn like the Ritva. Now what is Pshat Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chayim Heim? How can both be true? Either one is right or the other is right. If we're arguing about something, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. Again, the Gemara says, Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chayim Heim. In fact, to the point that the Gemara says, if they're both true, so why do we pass them like Beis? Well, if one is right and one is wrong, it's very simple why we pass them like Beis. One is right and one is wrong. Also, the Zohar says, supposedly, again, I don't know Zohar, but they quote him, that when Mashiach comes, the halacha will be like Beis Shammai. If Beis is right and Beis Shammai is wrong, then Torah doesn't change. Why, when Mashiach comes, will the halacha be like Beis Shammai? So the way the Ritva explains this, he's talking about Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chayim. He says Torah was given on 98 different levels, or 49 different levels, depending on how you read the Ritva. 48 panim l'tumah and 48 panim l'tara. That means there are different levels in Torah. And in the different levels of Torah, the practical manifestation will be different. If there's an argument Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel whether you should lay down by Kriya Shema or stand up by Kriya Shema. Beis Shammai says that at night you should lay down and in the morning you should stand up, and Beis Hillel says you can say it any way you want to. In 49 different levels up there, the halacha is like Beis Shammai, because in the level of the Torah, that's the practical manifestation, and in 49 different levels, the halacha we would do like Beis Hillel. And they're all 98 are 100% right. They're all Torah. The practical manifestation is not necessarily indicative of what's true and what's not true. We can only do one way. We can only paskin one way. So we are attached to one level of that Torah. That's the way we actually paskin halacha l'maisa, like that level of the Torah. The other man, the Amar, was not wrong. He was attached to a different level of Torah. To that different level of Torah, the practical manifestation is his way. Halacha and truth are not synonymous. Truth means it's Torah. Halacha means practical application of that. We can only do one of the many truths.
So even according to the rabbis, there are many different, coherent bodies of law. That way Israel can follow one set of rulings in one age, and another set of rulings in another age. If this is the case, then what's the problem with Jesus interpreting the law of Moses? On this system, perhaps Jesus' rulings are just on a different level. I don't even see why a rabbi would give the objection that Blech gives here. What about the idea that the forever laws in the Pentateuch are eternal and immutable, that not even God himself can overturn them? Let's take a look at the Bible. Leviticus 3:17 says, "It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling places, that you eat neither fat nor blood." And in this context, this commandment is not restricted to any particular class or any particular group. It's not restricted to the priests. This is, in its proper context, a commandment for all of Israel. So if this is eternal and is immutable, so much for Cholent. Sorry, man. But of course, we have to ask the question, did Jesus even resort to something this drastic as changing the law or trying to appeal to some different level of Torah? Let's examine the claims in order. First up, Matthew 12. The passage says nothing about whether or not Jesus gave his disciples permission to pluck the heads of grain, but just that the disciples did so. No explicit violation of the Mosaic law has occurred. Instead, the disciples are violating a Pharisaic interpretation of the law, and not the Mosaic law itself. Also, nobody is stealing from the fields, as some have accused. Leviticus 19 allows people to take grain from the edges of the fields. In Mark 2, there is no indication that it was a fast day on the Jewish calendar. Mark states that the Pharisees and disciples of John were fasting. It doesn't say anything about the whole of Israel. This was a voluntary fast, and no law was broken here. In Mark 7, Jesus is declaring that it is not food that makes someone spiritually unclean, but wicked and evil speech. The side comment that Jesus declared all foods to be clean is not Jesus's quote, but Mark's interpretation, even if it was in the original text, which we have reasons to doubt. But even if it was in the original text, it could easily be interpreted as Mark's suggestion to the Gentile readership that they need not follow the Jewish dietary laws, which would have cut these Gentiles off from their families and from their communities, and would have harmed their witness as missionaries. And besides, Midrash Tehillim 146:4 asks, what is meant by the Lord freed the prisoners? The answer given is, some say that every creature that is considered unclean in the present world, the Holy One, blessed be He, will declare clean in the age to come. So the idea of changing the dietary laws is not foreign to the rabbis themselves. Remember that Blech's objection is not that changing the dietary laws is inconsistent with the Christian system, but consistent with the rabbis. Blech's objection is that no one has the right to ever change the dietary laws, but this is obviously false given the Midrash here. And to any follower of the rabbinic tradition, this objection is just untenable. The reference to 1 Timothy is an attack on Paul, not on Jesus, and it misunderstands Paul's view of the law. Here's the whole paragraph from 1 Timothy. Now we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully, understanding this, that the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane, for those who strike their fathers and their mothers, for murderers, for the sexually immoral, men who practice homosexuality, enslavers, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine, in accordance with the gospel of the glory of the blessed God, which I have been entrusted. Paul did not hate the law. He explicitly stated that the law is good. He also mentioned that the laws of Moses, as well as the law in general, exists because of human wickedness. If we were all perfectly righteous, perhaps life would have been more like it was in Eden, where a very simple and different law is all that was needed. When you read passages such as the long passage I cited in Understanding Judaism, remember that the rabbis and skeptics alike take a lot of creative liberty, quoting short passages and then adding a whole lot of their own personal interpretation and commentary onto it. Make sure you divorce the passage from their commentary and interpretation and question their interpretation, because their personal interpretation often doesn't resemble the original meaning in the context of the New Testament. Watch out for this kind of trickery when reading rabbinic literature. Shalom Aleichem.